Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a brand new review. And today I'm going to be doing our final spoiler discussion on The Last of Us, Season 2, Episode 7, titled Convergence, which is now been released to the masses on HBO Max, Sky here in the UK. And we can finally talk about Season 2 as a whole. With Season 3 announced, there'll be a discussion on that at the end. And in recent days, Craig Mazin talking about needing a fourth potential season. So there is a lot to talk about with Last of Us Season 2. And with it being the finale, the final episode, I'm going to do a lovely shout out to Sam. It's his birthday today. I'm not going to ask him to do a video on his birthday. So please comment happy birthday for him as he does all the Last of Us videos of myself, alongside so many other ones for him as well. But everybody watching at home, please do comment below with your thoughts on The Last of Us, what you thought of the season. Did you prefer it to Season 1? If you've played the game, your thoughts on the season. If you haven't played the game, where does this leave you? I'll be giving some sort of thoughts from my family, I guess we can say, because there's been different reactions of different family members. And it's worth noting that today's episode was directed by Nina Lopez Corrado, of course, written by Neil Druckmann, Haley Gross, and Craig Mazin. So I'm going to be doing a breakdown of this episode. I'm going to be reflecting on Season 2 at the end as well, giving my overall thoughts on it. I will be playing the game again in the coming weeks once I've cleared out a couple of things on the to-do list, because the second game I only played the once back in 2020. So I have myself a PS5 version. If you have the PS4 version, you only pay £10 to get upgraded to PS5, so I'm going to be giving it a run on that. And if you want to find out about other videos, this rounds out like an insane few weeks of TV. We've had Andor discussions, we've had Last of Us discussions. Doctor Who finishes this week. Tate will be doing a spoiler discussion on the season with a few guests. So when we've got videos to announce, we'll put them on our social medias. And a massive thank you to everyone who's been following us for a while, watching our videos for years. We've had a ridiculous few weeks, if I'm completely honest. So it's a privilege to be able to do these sorts of things too. That being said, let's talk Convergence, because I came into this finale with a couple of questions. I loved last week's episode. I think last week's episode gave us some of the best acting in the season, with Pedro, with Bella Ramsey, particularly the porch sequence, and the placement of doing the flashback in Season 2 is very poignant. Very early, I'm going to add, which was obviously a big discussion with the game when it first came out. That were they making this change to pull it back earlier? I understood it from a story perspective. We've seen Ellie's descent into revenge. She's basically killed the first person with Nora, and let's show how she knew about what came to be. So that was a really interesting bridge to put that in between where the finale is. Because last week we kind of said, okay, we know what's going to happen in the finale next week now. And it's going to have a very different ending to what we thought. It will probably have a cliffhanger ending, which it does do to an extent. I didn't expect the ending we have, and I've put it in the thumbnail, and I'm delighted by that too. And I'll give my thoughts on that because it's very controversial. I'll give criticisms on that too, because I think this is going to be a struggle for the general audience. But overall, my thought on today's episode, I thought today was a fantastic episode. And we are starting to see the bookend. If people aren't aware of the themes of revenge, I forgot the right terminology used, but it's like cause and action. The reaction to everything that happens in the show is telegraphed that even if a character is drawing the line at peace, unfortunately someone else is going to want revenge for what's happened prior, which is, a great way to epitomize the last sequence. So I'm going to be giving some thoughts on that. And where I'm going to go this, I'm going to talk about certain characters, some of which we'll see return, some of which we won't. I'll give them their moments, and as I said, I will be reflecting on the season. But when we get the opening of this, we have the sequence of Ellie and Dina, where we obviously have Ellie confessing about what Joel did at the hospital, what she did to the Salt Lake City. This was a really good scene. And the reason I want to set this in particular is a few weeks ago I came on here, I think it was episode 4, and we had Dina so enthusiastically saying, I would do whatever it takes to get the people that got my family. Basically, if I'm in your situation after what they did to Joel, I absolutely would be doing exactly what you want to do with the revenge tour. And what I thought was really interesting in this, and I've watched this episode twice today. I watched it when I woke up and I watched it just before I went live. It isn't a moment where Dina loses Ellie as such. I think that's the wrong way of saying it. But in this sequence, we see the reality of the situation, that not only is Dina pregnant, but we are starting to see her detach from Ellie. And you go past that scene from 3 weeks ago where Dina finds out what Joel did was actually quite terrible. And the conversation with Ellie saying, these are the people that came for him, and they came for him because of this reason. Well, she knew Joel had done that, She didn't know until Nora that they were the group that were getting revenge for exactly what he did do. And that's where I start to lean toward last week's episode, where we had this great stuff where we're bringing that cycle of the reaction to an event that took place. It's the cause and effect. And with Joel, you enter season 2, he knew what was somewhat coming. And when the time come, we have these other characters who were, thereabouts with not only Abby, obviously. We had Mel, we had Owen, we had Manny, who's not in this at the moment. We obviously had Nora as well. So it's starting to really come together. And the biggest concern I have is this is a 7-episode season, and I'll probably get into that really towards the end because I think that should be worth its own discussion point. But I like Dean's reactions that she finds out Joel wasn't the guy she thought he was. Maybe she thought he was like her parent and sister where they hadn't done anything wrong. But in fact, does she agree that Joel deserved it? Does she not agree? Does she think that they just want to get home because she's wounded? And I like what this episode was setting up with the pair of them. It sets up for a conflict down the line. Obviously, if you played the game, you know what down the line is. If you haven't, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But we start to see Ellie have not come back towards reality, but it looks like this mission could be over. And then obviously we get to the next day when we're going to find out that Tommy hasn't returned still. They've got a meetup point. It's in like a library or a shop. And we're going to send them out on their way there. And this is where I think something I've praised the show for doing for 2 seasons is developing supporting characters who aren't Joel, who aren't Ellie, giving them so much more to do. And it's really difficult to do that in a game because, sorry, I'm yawning, you are tied down to 2 or 3 individuals as such. And it's supporting characters to them, and yes, you spend time with them, but sometimes when you get someone new, you can only spend time with them, but the time with them is spent in the basis of a game. It isn't written for TV. And I think this is where the TV stuff works really well, where Craig Mazin comes on board, he's developing, let's take Bill, for example. We get the entire Bill episode, obviously a really random one to compare to this, but I've sort of spoke all season about how I think Dean has been incredible in the show, Isabella Mercer playing her. And then in this one, we have Jesse, who I think is probably the standout of today's episode, not only for what happens to him, which is a discussion in itself, but this is probably the moral compass. Played by young Mazzino, I've got to add. I've not seen Beef. I know who's in Beef, but it's probably the most tragic character in the season. And there's a lot of it, incredibly tragic characters. But you look at every single character that made a decision to be involved with the revenge tour on Joel, or to go to Seattle to kill them or to vote on it. And we really get Jesse mapped out quite horrifically when you know what's going to come, but he finds out he's going to be dad first of all. Whilst he is fine with Ellie being with Dina, it's the line about him saying, I want to get my child out of here. And he speaks multiple times about how he's not going to die here. This isn't the place for him to die in. And, he is part of Jackson. We get this incredible backstory about the person that he fell for, the person that he loved, who he couldn't be with because he had to stay loyal to the town and the community that took him in, and they are his priority, nobody over that. And it isn't a character that's saying, I'm God's gift to the earth, but it's a very noble character in a series where there are a lot of unnoble people, where, it's a series about survival. It's about how terrible people can be as much as how this infection can take a hold of you. So to have this character today as such, allowing that kid to die or be took away by the wolves, stopping Ellie going after them, and to which I agree with. There are 6 of them, there are 2 of you. That's not your mission. You put yourself and more other people in danger if you choose to get involved. Otherwise, it is cowardice that some people could argue from a gaming perspective. Sure, in a game, you can go and kill 100 people in a level. That's fine. That doesn't matter. But when it's a series, you need to have, I don't use a bit of realism, but you need to have a consistency in the writing. And if you don't have those consistencies in the writing, then unfortunately you're going to miss out on so much. And it is making that jump from a game to a series where you've got less screen time with the lead characters, but you're going to get more time with supporting ones, and everything has to be exactly the way it needs to be in these sequences. And the Jesse side delivered. Having them in the shop, having the sequence with Tommy where we know he's the sniper, we know he's shooting at them, Jesse going after Tommy, Ellie refusing to, the argument about the community. I saw my community basically get bashed to death in front of me. Essentially, you do you, I do me. And I love the revelation that Jesse didn't vote for them to go and do the revenge, and that he was correct in that. And it's a very controversial opinion probably for me to have. I like the fact it adds that element to the story. There are people that were for that, people that were against that, but Jesse, being the best of them, took it on himself to do this mission to bring them both back because he does care for them. And I think it leaves him in a really interesting position for him to get to his final scene in this episode. That being said, with Ramsey's performance as Ellie, I thought was incredible in this episode as well. Given the material we get from the game, that we're going to change some things here and there, I think overall it has worked much better for the series. Other issues I have with that I'll get to later, but it's one of them where there's been a lot of obviously unjust stuff put online in recent weeks, which we know happens a lot with these sorts of shows with certain fan bases. But the chemistry with Bella and Chase, I thought was really, really well done. And it adds so much more to Dina as a character, that we get to see her, refusing the alcohol, given the clues that she might be pregnant, and not putting herself first. If she put herself first, she'd have took the booze when he pushed the arrow through. She'd have said, you can let me die, it's fine, whatever. But she doesn't. And the pregnancy parallels obviously go so much deeper in this. But obviously, we're going to get the moment with Ellie heading off to the aquarium, one of, the big sequences from the game. If you're not familiar with that, the iconography of the wheel. I'm pretty sure it's a real place in Seattle. I could be wrong. I don't know American geography, so I really don't. But what I loved with this one is bringing in the sequence of Isaac, and I think it's his lieutenant officer, where we start to get not the tease going, but something's going down tonight. And his words are, let's bring Abby into it. Let's start Abby, who has not been seen since episode 2 in the show, and she's had a presence about being there, which is a testament to how she came across in those opening episodes. But for Isaac to be talking about saying, she's going to be the leader of this group. I won't be here tomorrow. I probably won't be here tomorrow. You probably won't be here tomorrow. But we need the leader to lead this army. And what's the point of having it without her? And I love it starts to play into that there is intrigue of what is to come. And again, as people who have played the games, we know what is to come. And there'll be people who have not played the games, people I've watched the show with, who are curious of what's to come. And that leads up to the boat sequences where we're seeing them going off on this mission, turning all the lights off on the boats to get forward to do an attack of sorts, because we know something's going to go down to the Seraphites. And in turn of that, then having Ellie and the aquarium have the wave crash, fine, washed up on shore, fine, it works for TV purposes. Having her going into the jungle to almost be killed, I was really uncertain on the first viewing what I thought of that, because I was sort of sat there to the extent thinking, are they going to deviate away from the main story? Are we going to get this extended sequence to start setting other things up for the future? I do not know. But where it did work, I would say at its best, it worked because sorry, I'm yawning, I'm not emotional. It's been one of them days. Bank holiday. It's one of those because there's a lot to cram into this finale. And at this point in time, we've maybe got 15, 20 minutes left of the episode. And when you've got such short amount of time left, and yet we as a viewer know there's a lot to fill in. If you haven't played the games, and this is where the season is going to be make or break for some, they're probably thinking Abby is in there. If you haven't played the games, you know Abby's not in there. So everyone's going to have a different reaction to these final moments. It's the final moments of the series. Something's going to happen. Is Abby in there? She knows she's in there. She's been told she's in there. How are people going to react to that? And the fact that she then so quickly gets out the forest, moves on past that scene, which feels very unnecessary. However, that is part, the village is being attacked. We've seen the wolves going off on the boats. We've seen explosions. It's painting the scene to know something big has been happening behind the scenes. But as we're following the story of Ellie at this point, we don't know what that is. We don't know the history between them. We don't know what's been planned. We don't know why Isaac thinks he could die. We don't know why Abby's going to be the leader. We just know that something's happened, but that clears the path for Ellie to move forward to the aquarium. No dogs in the aquarium scene, which I'm fine with. And I love the production design in this episode. I think the show's at its best when we get to spend time going around, and it's like playing the games that not all it looks the same, but I enjoy seeing these monuments or these buildings that have been run down for decades, that the attention to detail that goes into making these, that everything felt so real and has their own identities. I think that's something the show has always done so well. The children's books being in the shop, I like those sorts of things. It adds to me a bit more about the world. Of course, you could do a rundown bookshop and just have no books on display, but the show has always made it feel like it was a lived-in world. And not only was it a lived-in world, that decades have gone by since the outbreak to reduce it to almost nothing. And that, again, with the aquarium sequence, is almost like a horror location, yet before an outbreak that would have been this lovely bustling aquarium, as they are very nice places to go to usually. So setting all that up to get toward Abby, to find out Abby isn't there. Instead, we have Owen and we have Mel. A very, very important moment. Probably one of the biggest moments of the season. Bringing back season 1 conversations of when Joel basically had 2 different people to point at the map twice to find out if they're lying or not, and then he'd kill them. To Ellie to have inherited that over the 5 years, I thought was a really cool little nod of the head. And on top of that, getting to the fatal moment in which, Owen goes for the gun. Ellie had no intention of killing them. She only wants to get to Abby. And he goes for the gun, which cost him his life. And unfortunately, through the stray bullet going through the neck, busting the neck of Mel, we lose her too. And in the most tragic of circumstances, find out that she is pregnant. And Ellie did not know. And she has just shot a pregnant person whilst her own girlfriend is pregnant herself, which adds the most horrific double jeopardy for characters in the show. And this is where I think this episode got me for the first time, where she wanted to perform the cesarean, which is just horrific, that we've got this kid still who doesn't have a clue what's going on. She has not meant to hurt this person. She had no intention of hurting this person. But by horrific accident, which is still her fault, she has shot her and she's going to die. She needs to cut the baby out to keep the baby alive. And unfortunately, she can't do it. It's so disturbing. And it's so incredibly well performed by Bella Ramsey. And I have to give credit to the actress of Medicine. Apologies, her name escapes me, but this scene is almost make or break for the season for me. That if you don't get this part right, you lose the fundamentals of what the following story and emotion that follows it's going to be. And to then choose to bring in Jesse, to bring in Tommy doing the Pedro Pascal hands around the face, baby girl type thing, was incredible to do that too. That seeing her, not her uncle, but obviously Tommy, Joel's brother, doing that sort of same thing. A small little moment that adds so much more to it, and the pair of them looking in absolute horror upon the bodies they've seen. Fundamentally, at this point, they don't know it's not her fault. It's not her fault that she killed Mel, but she has, and she is responsible for that. And there's a baby that has died too due to that. So it's a really powerful scene. The music as well. We know how good Gustavo is with the score. His music across both games, his music across both seasons has been remarkable. And it is just, it's an identity within itself. And it's at its best when it is being more, not atmospheric, but when you have these emotional moments where these characters, the way in which it's performed, it just adds so much more emotion to what the score and the story is doing alongside these characters. And it can't be understated the importance of that in the series, in those games. And it's at its absolute best here as we then segue into them getting back to the theatre, which leads us toward the ending. Tommy having the discussion with her saying, can you have peace that whilst Abby has walked free, and that is the person who got Joel, these other people, they were there. They knew what they were doing. And it is sort of correct that these were people that were with Abby on that mission. They wanted to see Joel die, maybe not to the extent Abby did in terms of the slow, torturous nature of it, but they were all involved. And from the point of view, and Ellie of the characters' point of view is going to be such an important word for season 3, that they were accomplices. In the same way that some of Ellie's crew are going to look like accomplices, should Abby find out what happens. And the scene with Jesse, where him and Abby somewhat settle their differences, basically saying, I did want to go back for you, but I know that if I was in trouble, I know that you would burn hell and earth to get to me, and I appreciate that. And again, to horrifically put Jesse in these beautiful moments throughout this episode today, where we get to see him, he's talking about having a son and how he can't die, that he's been seen as the future of the Jackson community, and that community does so much more to him. He could have picked a happier life and gone with the person he loved, but he owed it to a community not to go. And here he is chasing after Ellie for that. To have his moment a piece of Ellie and then to be immediately killed by Abby is fucking horrific. It is so much better than the game did. And I have to give them credit for doing this. If you weren't aware, I would love to know what people thought if this caught them by surprise if it didn't. But for me watching, when you know something's coming, it makes it all the more brutal. And at the same time of that, I am somewhat sat there thinking that this is one of the few characters that actually did nothing wrong. Like, sure, he's violent, like they can be. Like, he obviously knows how to kill people. He survived multiple days. He's crossed the country to Seattle with them. But this is somebody that only did it to bring them home. He had no intention of doing this. He voted against this mission in the first place. And we see him, I would declare him an innocent character killed because Ellie was after revenge for Joel. And why was she after revenge for Joel? Because Abby was after revenge for what happened to her father. So there are so many things that come into this process, the cycle of never-ending death in The Last of Us. It's so well done. And bringing in Caitlin Devereux back as Abby for this scene in particular, granted, she had a couple of lines. Her performance is outstanding. I know they've submitted her for the Emmy for guest star, I think for episode 2. I don't know if they've put the considerations out yet, but even in this one scene, the presence she has, the delivery of those lines, Abby feels like a threat to Ellie. You can see in her that she'd killed her friends, that she's not happy is an understatement, but the line message, I let you live, is just delivered in such a chilling way that it does set up for what is to follow, and what follows is obviously the gunshot going off and the cut to black. And I think that's going to cause problems for a lot of people. Not the performance of Abby, but the cut to black, the 2-year wait for season 3. And I'll get to that. But having, I don't want to call it the epilogue. You have the cut to black, and then we wake up with Abby. We get to go to the baseball pitch, and then we have her on the balcony. Isaac wants to speak to her. Is this the day after? No, it's Seattle, day 1. Let's end the season. I've put it in the thumbnail. We are getting the Abby point of view story, and then season 2 ends. Now, as someone that loves that second game, that really appreciates the character of Abby and what they did as a story with the second season, with the second game, I didn't mind the Abby POV. I didn't know how they were going to approach season 2. I didn't know if we were going to get any of her background in season 2. It wasn't in the marketing, but at the same time as that, you just didn't know. This week, there has now been discussions that The Last of Us may stretch to 4 seasons, that Craig Mazin thinks that it will take 4 seasons to tell the story overall. I understand that, and I'm going to just jump in and be completely honest. I'm not happy with it, because that sounds arrogant. My biggest issue of season 2 is that season 2 is too short. It's 7 episodes. I'm not sitting here justifying budgets, how studios work, story, narrative structures. I don't know. We know how long the second game is. There is a natural jumping point to split the second game in half. But if we're now talking about 4 seasons, if we're now going to get Abby's point of view, I'm very concerned that season 3 will only be Abby's point of view, with maybe 1 episode of it not being her point of view, and it may alienate audiences. The decision to put a cliffhanger on a 7-episode series, with season 3 not filming until 1 year's time, which means we're looking at the absolute earliest 2027 to do a cliffhanger, I do not like. And I don't think I'm going to be the only one alone in thinking I do not like this cliffhanger. I understand the placement of it. I understand the context of it. And I really appreciate doing what they did with Abby. And I'm not going to sit here sound like an ungrateful child. We just got 12 magnificent episodes of Andor. Could anyone justify to me right now as to why The Last of Us Season 2 couldn't be 12 episodes, couldn't be 15 episodes? I don't need to hear a conversation about the word budget, because Season 1 performed that well. It is one of their biggest assets for doing an adaptation to live action, the prestige that came with it. I think general audiences are going to struggle coming back for the 3rd season, because it isn't an earned cliffhanger. I think that's going to frustrate audiences. I think if you're like me, let's play the game, we're like, great, we know what's going to come up, and this isn't a spoiler, but as I said, most of season 3 is going to be Abby's perspective. Going back to day 1, you can now work out for yourselves that we'll see her day 1, day 2, day 3, maybe earlier times than that with her dad's. But I think this could be a real issue for the production. It also makes me think that in turn, season 3 would then be very short, that season 3 could also be 6-7 episodes. And I don't know if a season 4 could be justified in more than 3 or 4 episodes. So I'm at somewhat of an impasse that I very much enjoyed the second season, but I'm concerned about the future of the series. As someone that's a big fan of that second game, as I've said, I'm not saying my opinion is valid more. As someone that knows exactly what is going to happen, we know the reaction to that game. We know that some people didn't like Joel being killed. We know that some people didn't like having Abby's perspective and point of view, that you couldn't get past that to get back to the future. I don't mind it in the story of the game. It works as a game. If they'd have released the game and the game ended with how this has ended, I would be raging. I would be unsatisfied. And I know there is a thing about patience with TV. They don't have everything all at once. But whilst it felt like a season finale, it also felt like a mid-season finale. You know, think about when, is it Negan, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, did the baseball bat thing in Walking Dead? The whole world saw that moment. Who did he kill? You'll find out in a few months. Not, you'll find out in probably 2 years' time. And I think that's going to alien audiences, which is a shame because it's a wonderful second season. I've had a lot of fun with it. As much fun as you can have with a story as sort of heavy as this. I think it's had some of the best performances across both seasons. I think we've seen Bella Ramsey come into her own in this show, playing the role of Ellie. Isabella Mercer, who's been a fantastic addition, who I think has been the heart of the second season, who I think, if I'm going to be blunt, maybe has given us the best performance of the second season. We've had Pedro Pascal in two small, across 2 and a bit episodes, where he's, done what Pedro does so well, and we'll be talking about Emmys with him potentially later this summer. We brought in Caitlin Dever as Abby, who I think is an incredible actress who, as everyone says, would have made a great Ellie. Yes, agreed, 10 years ago when she was the right age for that. I'm just happy we've got her in, and I do think she's got the ability to carry a season by herself, which may be the case. I think that's something worth mentioning, that I don't know if she'd win an Emmy or if she'd be nominated for supporting actress in a guest role, but she is someone that I think is going to absolutely nail what Abby's story is. And if you're not familiar with Abby's story, I really do suggest playing the game to get yourself a heads up, because it's a lot more interesting than you think. Not everybody likes it, but I think off the 2 key scenes we've had with her in the season, not only has she made the role her own, not only has she made the role of Abby by herself, it doesn't feel like a cut and paste from the game. It feels like this is this character for TV, and with Craig Mazin's writing and the history of this franchise, I think it's in very safe hands with Caitlin Dever to lead the 3rd season. So I am excited. I am nervous, as I explained, about the audiences and being unsatisfied by a second season. But for me, as a fan, I'm in on this. It's fine. Season 2 has been a solid season. It's not as good as season 1. And I've said this before, it's the conversation of the game, right? The Last of Us 1 is my favorite game of all time. The second game was so completely different to anything that was done with it. I understood exactly why it turned some people off. It turned others for it. I don't know if there are people that prefer the second game to the first. If they do, fair, absolute play to you. Not me, myself, if I'm honest. But again, you're comparing a 12-hour game to a 30-hour game. It's so hard to do so. And I think what's harder than even comparing the 2 games themselves is then having that go into a live action series where you build up an audience off that first season. They're coming back 2 years later, not 7 years later like the game, to have these events unfold. But at least when we waited 7 years for a game, we were able to have an outcome after playing it for 30 hours. We're going to have to wait another 2 years for people to get maybe another third of an outcome. As I said, I'm worried this is going to be a 4-season show. I don't know if there's enough material to make it go for 4 seasons. I want to be proven wrong, because by the time this is done, could be one of the best bingeable shows ever. If you've got season 1 and then 2 through to 4, that would be amazing. But I'm unsure at the moment. But I can't fault the production. I can't fault the technical ability of it, the writing processes. I can't fault the performances. It's such a solid season of TV. I will say there has been some terrible luck that this has come out at the same time as Andor Season 2, because it is not Andor Season 2. Whilst this is a great show, it is not the all-timer that Andor has become. Whereas the first season of The Last of Us had absolutely everything nailed down that needs to be nailed down. So that's like my polite summary of Season 2. I don't know if we'll do more videos in Season 2. I am going to be playing the game. As I said, I want to do it properly now. But it's a weird one, and I think other people will feel the same. So it's a weird way to end talking the season. It's very strange, but that's how I'm going to do it. So, as I said, please do comment your thoughts on The Last of Us, particularly Season 2, or your thoughts on the second game, what you're looking forward to the 3rd season. Have we missed talking about anybody? I think I covered all the scenes. If you're a fan of this, if you just discovered this, we've done all reviews on all the Last of Us episodes across season 1, season 2. We've even interviewed Tommy of the games, who was obviously in the first season in live action as well. So that was amazing to do that a couple of years ago. So we're a big fan of the game. It's been a bit difficult to cover this season, especially at the same time as Andor and so many other things going on. So that's going to be me rounding out. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one.